So embroidery, whether it's hand or machine, adds value to any piece of clothing or fabric. I'll get to what you need for machine embroidery a bit later, but for right now, let's go with what's more affordable and easier to use. Hand embroidery. First up, hoops. You're gonna want at least one of these. It just depends on the size of your project you're making. Just keep in mind that this project may take 6 hours and this one will take 50 years. Right, next up, fabrics. From classic linen to sturdy fabric or even leather if you're a bit mental. Your choice of fabric can add a real unique texture to each project. So look at the difference between even this and this. Ignore how shocking my Union Jack looks. I know it was my first hand embroidery. So just keep that in mind. Now, the stabby needles. These are vital to embroidery if you didn't know. What you're gonna do, just stare at the canvas like this. Trying to will it into existence. No, you're not. More often than not, it's the thicker the needle, the thicker the fabric, basically. So leather, you'll have a really thick needle. The bigger the hole in the needle, the more thread you're trying to get through it. So, you know, stab, thread, you get it. Another importance is embroidery floss. Oh, what are you doing? Get out! No, not that kind of floss. This kind, mate, come on. There are lots of different types of embroidery thread, but the most common is stranded cotton. Now, a common mistake that people make, they would just take this full thing, stick it in a needle, and say go. Well, no, stop. Don't go, because it breaks apart into 6 pieces. So you essentially have 6 different size options of thread that you want to use. Also, when threading your needle, you're going to want one of these little bastards because they make it way easier. I mean, you just thread in, needle, boom, done. Eventually, you're going to be wanting to cut something. Crazy, man. So you got to buy a pair of scissors. So the scissors I use are actually these. They're kind of meant for your toes, but I've never cut my toes in my entire life, okay? Don't look at me like that. I'm not weird. Right. They have a really nice curve to them, so you can get really close to the fabric without cutting anything you don't want to cut. To transfer your designs onto something, you're going to want to buy some iron erasable pens. These are very useful. You can draw whatever you want and erase it with an iron. You can also get some tracing paper if your fabric is thin enough, then shine light through it to trace your design. There are other ways to do it as well, but I'm not going to go into depth right now with that. But here's a list of all of them if you want to go more in depth yourself. Right, to avoid stabbing your finger for 12 hours straight, you're going to want to get dripped out with some fucking thimbles. To avoid... These ones were and I'm probably doing them disgrace right now. These ones were given to me by a friend of ours and it was their grandmother. These have saved a lot of fingers. You won't think it now. Trust me, you'll want these in the future. Okay, stabilizers. Trust me, these will help you stay sane and stable through your embroidery journey. Now, as far as different types of stabilizers, I'll leave you with the main 3. There's water soluble, tear away, and cut away. Water soluble is for fabrics that you're not needing that much stability with. It washes away with water and is the lightest one. If you're not trying to see your stabilizer, go with water soluble. Tear away you're maybe going to use for those medium fabrics. You can, like the name suggests, just tear it away. Cut away, guess what? You cut it away. This one's more permanent though. Great for things that pucker a lot. Knit fabrics and stuff like that. You're going to be wanting to use cutaway to give that fabric some more stability when it's lacking it. If you want to go more in depth into stabilizers, here's a list for you as well. Just pause that, Google that. I'm just not going to go into too much depth with it right now. If you want to buy any of the tools I've just mentioned, they're all down in the description. While you're down there, consider subscribing as well. Appreciate it. Thank you. Now let's switch into some less finger stabby work, okay? Well, as long as you're careful at least. Machine embroidery and what you're gonna need for it. First off, you're gonna need an embroidery machine. These range from beginner-friendly single needle models to more advanced multi-needle machines. If you're just starting out and don't wanna spend a literal down payment on a house, I would buy a single needle machine like the one I have, the Brother F540E. Now, the beauty of it is there is no quality difference between a single needle and a multi-needle. The only difference they really have is that obviously I'm gonna be there changing the color every time. It may be a bit of a pain in the ass, but it's better than spending all that money. And if you have the money, go for it. Honestly, I want to buy a multi-needle machine. So if you've got the money, maybe can you give me embroidery machine, maybe? So you've got your embroidery machine. Now, needles. If I were you as a beginner, I would stick with 7511 needles. This is because they're the embroidery industry standard for most embroidery machines. If you're curious of the numbers, that's just 75 is European size, 11 is American size. Next up, threads. Trust me, you are not going to want to cheap out on threads, all right? Don't do it. Think about this. If you're spending so much money on an embroidery machine already, why on earth would you buy cheap thread that goes through it and run the risk of potentially breaking your machine, having to send it out for repairs? It's going to be more expensive for you in the long run. So just buy good thread for your sake. The thread I use is new Brotherhood threads. There are a lot of good brands out there. This is just one of the first ones that I found and have stuck with, and I've not had a single thread break. So considering how many flags I'm embroidering every day, that's a miracle really. So they are some good threads. Here's a list as well of some other good threads I've heard of, so you can check them out. Eventually at some point you're gonna find yourself needing to cut either fabric or threads. Find yourself a good pair of fabric scissors like that. Also, these are toe clippers, but I've never done it. I don't cut my bloody toes, all right? Don't look at me like that. These just get real close to the edge. So I'm not weird, you're weird for thinking these are weird. Cuticle scissors, very nice. And now bobbins. These little things go into the bottom of your machine. So the way an embroidery machine works is that you have the bobbin thread and that sits at the bottom, and it almost links with the top thread like that to create tension in the middle of your fabric. And that's how you get really clean, nice looking embroidery. You can either buy pre-wound bobbins, which come all neat and tidy if you want to spend that money, or you can wind your own bobbins. On most sewing machines or embroidering machines, they'll have a winding feature. So I would just wind your own if I were you, but also if you got the money, send it, buy some bobbins. The most important thing about bobbins though is actually what you end up filling it with. So there's a specific type of thread called bobbin fill, and it's way thinner than normal top thread, normal embroidery thread. So you end up having a much less dense embroidery because you don't want that density. In the embroidery world, it's called having a bulletproof thing when it's like you can't even move it because there's so much thread in there. Granted, if you do want to see a specific color on the bottom, you can wind bobbin threads with top thread. Just bear in mind your embroidery will be thicker. Like all embroidery, you're going to end up needing some hoops at some point. These come in all different shapes and sizes. This is a 4x4 embroidery hoop used on most beginner models. This is a 5x7 inch hoop. This is what my machine runs. It's considered a large embroidery hoop, and this would be the standard. This would be tiny boy, don't know what he's doing. Now the hoop size you should take into account whenever buying any new machine, because this is where it's going to limit your embroidery. For instance, if you buy an embroidery machine that can only do this, well then that's what you can do. Aside from having a repositional hoop, the way these work is it cuts your embroidery in half. So this is where you would embroider your section. My machine can do this, and then I would move it on my machine and it would do that. Other than that multi-hoop, you are limited by the size that your machine can produce. I will say though, you will not feel limited as a beginner starting with a 5x7 inch hoop. This is perfect size for chest designs, any, you know, you can put this, put it up a sleeve or whatever. If you can do 5x7, I think that's what you should do. Unless you want to have like a, you know, snake that wraps around your whole arm, you know. Can't be doing that. Sadly, not yet. Unless you got the multi-hoop. So next up, fabrics. Whether it's knit, canvas, or even leather if you want to join the local biker gang. Your choice here makes more of an impact than you realize. There's a unique texture to each one that can give different looks to different projects that you're working on. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're choosing a fabric. Equally, fabric stabilizer will help you stay mentally stable through your embroidery journey. Especially when it comes to light fabrics where it really puckers a lot, that can be a pain in the arse. Now, as far as the different types of stabilizers go, I'll leave you with the main three. Water soluble, tear away, and cutaway stabilizer. With water soluble, you're going to be using this on fabrics that are already pretty stable, just to give it that extra stability where you don't really need it, but it just peace of mind, really. With tear away, like the name suggests, you can just tear it away from your embroidery and you're not going to see as much of it, and it's not as annoying as this next one. Tearaway is a medium stabilizer in between these two, really. Cutaway, pretty self-explanatory, you cut it away. Now this one's going to be more permanent. You'll want this for your knits, your jersey fabric, stuff that stretches a lot. You'll be wanting this one. You kind of want to weigh how stable the stabilizer is versus how visible you want the stabilizer. Now, for all the goats that want to digitize their own designs, you're going to need embroidery software. I use Hatch Embroidery 3. With digitizing software, you can literally create anything. There is no limit. Your imagination is the limit. I've not used all the different types of embroidery software, but if you want to do your own research, feel free to look up all of these. These are the industry standards and what the professionals are using. So when you've finished a digitization, you're going to end up wanting to use that and stitch it out. So do not forget to buy a USB. If you don't have a USB, some machines you can do Wi-Fi and transfer designs with Wi-Fi. But if you don't have that, do get a USB, it's helpful. So once you've embroidered something, get a lighter as well, so you can do this. Cozy. Another useful thing is a spool holder for your threads. This will help you organize larger spools, like if you want black or white, you'll use one of those. The links to all the equipment shown in this video are all down below. While you're down there, consider subscribing for more embroidery and clothing content. Also, here are some cool YouTubers I've enjoyed watching. Peace.